Look, the mask is off now. And if you had any doubts about the war happening in hip-hop right now, take a breath, because the receipts are stacking up and the story we're about to walk into is not the kind you forget. What Glasses Malone just said, and what he just doubled down on again, on camera, on record, in front of God and everybody, is the kind of allegation that doesn't get made unless somebody, somewhere, has seen something. Somebody has heard something. Somebody has sat in a room and watched the machine move. And now that machine has a name attached to it, and that name, allegedly, is Drake. Before we get one step further into the war zone, congratulations are owed to Kendrick Lamar, because while a certain camp has spent the last 2 years pretending Kendrick Lamar is irrelevant, Kendrick Lamar just crushed another number that no one in the history of rap music has ever crushed before. Not like us. The record Drake's people said would fade. The record they said the culture would forget. The record they swore was just a summer moment has now become the fastest rap song in history to smash 2 billion streams on Spotify. 2 billion. And the record it broke? Industry Baby by Lil Nas X and Jack Harlow, which, if you were paying attention, was previously the ceiling everyone thought no rap song could ever top this fast. Not Like Us didn't top it. Not Like Us obliterated it. Not Like Us made it look like a rounding error. And here's the piece that should sit heavy in every Drake fan's chest right now. This record was not just a hit. It became a national anthem. Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us shows up at NBA games. It shows up at NFL victories. It shows up at Champions League finals. It shows up in stadium tunnels, in playoff celebrations, in Super Bowl halftime shows watched by more than 130 million people. Kendrick Lamar didn't just release a diss track. Kendrick Lamar released a cultural weapon that the entire planet adopted as their own. And every single time a sports broadcast plays it, every single time a coach walks off a court to it, every single time an athlete points at a camera and mouths the lyrics, the Drake camp loses another inch of ground it will never, ever get back. Now, before the Drake loyalists rush the comments, because we know you will, let's remember this. Kendrick Lamar was already a Hall of Fame rapper before the beef ever cracked open. Kendrick Lamar had already won a Pulitzer Prize. Kendrick Lamar had already sold out arenas across 4 continents. Kendrick Lamar had already outsold most of your favorites on first-week numbers years before the smoke ever cleared. So the tired argument that Kendrick Lamar only exists because of the battle? Read the room. That argument was dead on arrival. That argument was never a real argument. That argument was a survival mantra you all whispered to yourselves in the mirror when the numbers stopped adding up. And yet, here we are in 2026, and that same broken mantra is still being recycled by the same broken accounts running the same broken script, because when the truth doesn't move for you, you either grow, or you scream louder into the void hoping the volume covers the emptiness. And here's the twist. Because while Kendrick Lamar is out here breaking records without saying a single public word, the other side is doing everything except making music people actually love on their own terms. Every single week, we get another wave of manufactured noise from the same faces, the same podcasts, the same platforms, the same commentary crew running the same tired script. And now Glasses Malone, a man who is not a rumor account, not a blog, not a burner page, but a Compton veteran with real, weighted, decades-deep credibility in the culture, is standing on the claim that Drake has been financing a campaign against YG. A campaign to steer the Drakeo the ruler narrative. A campaign to put pressure on YG's freedom. A campaign designed to move a story, and move it hard, into a place where the outcome favors one side and one side only. That is not a small allegation. That is a nuclear allegation. And Glasses Malone, when he was asked to walk it back, did the exact opposite. Glasses Malone said, quote, "I meant every word." Glasses Malone said keep pushing him, keep asking him, keep begging him to say more, and eventually the finished results are not going to be something anyone likes. Glasses Malone said the Drake fanbase has been crying every week since May of 2024, and that no amount of money, no amount of campaigns, no amount of paid narratives will ever fix what got broken that summer. Glasses Malone said you can call 1,000 people, you can finance 1,000,000 campaigns, and none of it will move the culture off the position the culture has already taken. Glasses Malone said this with a smirk, with a shrug, with the kind of relaxed body language that only comes from a man who knows what he knows and is not planning on unknowing it. And then, listen to this, because this is the part that changes everything. Glasses Malone is no longer alone in the accusation. Kid Mio went on Hot 97 and echoed the same sentiment. Kid Mio said what Glasses Malone said is not far-fetched. Kid Mio said the machinery is real. Kid Mio said the messaging is coordinated. Kid Mio said DJ Academics has openly bragged on his own stream that he will run a false story if it helps Drake. And when a New York veteran and a Compton veteran land in the same corner on a story like this, across coasts, across scenes, across generations, the picture stops looking like a rumor and starts looking like a pattern. And patterns, in hip-hop, do not exist without receipts sitting somewhere behind them, waiting for the right moment to walk into the light. Cut to the bone. This is not the first time a rapper of significance has accused the Toronto camp of manufacturing narratives. Pusha T said it, back when the story of Adidon nearly ended Drake's career in real time. Meek Mill lived it, back when a ghostwriting scandal turned into a media wildfire that only one camp seemed prepared for. J. Cole tap danced around it right before he removed himself from the entire battle. Rick Ross hinted at it. Joe Budden alluded to it. And now, in 2026, Glasses Malone is saying that same script is being run again, but this time the target is YG, and this time the wound the story is trying to reopen belongs to Drakeo the Ruler. And if there is anything Kendrick Lamar taught us over the past 2 years, it is that where there is smoke, there is usually a whole flame factory hiding in the basement, complete with a permit, an accountant, and a public relations firm on retainer. So let's talk about the mechanics of it, because a lot of Drake fans are pretending they don't understand how any of this actually works. Civil lawsuits, filed by the Drakeo the Ruler estate against Live Nation, generate pressure on the arenas. Arenas, wanting to avoid the same lawsuits, generate pressure on the police. Police, under pressure, dig deeper into the investigation. Blogs, hungry for traffic, run whatever tips land in their inbox first. Commentators, chasing clicks, amplify whichever tip travels the furthest. And along the way, if certain stories start dropping into certain blogs at certain moments, curated by certain commentators with certain relationships to certain billionaires, well, suddenly a public perception forms. Suddenly the target of that perception is looking down the barrel of an investigation shaped not by facts, but by a narrative funded, allegedly, by a man with the deepest pockets in the game. That is not paranoia. That is media literacy in 2026. That is understanding how modern smear campaigns operate in an ecosystem where truth is a suggestion and virality is the only currency that clears. That is the accusation Glasses Malone is making. Let it breathe for a second. Because if any of it is true, we are watching one of the most calculated smear operations in modern rap history, and the person at the center of it, allegedly, is Drake. And now YG. YG heard every word. YG did not stay silent. YG went straight to Instagram and lit up a red alert. YG basically told his own team to be ready, to be alert, to watch their backs, and to understand that the story being planted about him is not accidental. It is designed. It is engineered. It is being fed to platforms YG cannot control. And it is landing on timelines faster than the truth can catch up. Which, if you have followed hip-hop for more than 5 minutes, you know exactly how that pattern ends. It ends with somebody in a courtroom. It ends with somebody in a headline. It ends, sometimes, with somebody in a body bag. And that is why Glasses Malone is standing on his square right now, because Glasses Malone knows that when the machine starts painting a picture, the picture eventually becomes the reality people believe in, even if the picture was never true. Even if the picture was never even close to true. Now, Drake fans, let's be honest with each other for once. Drake is a billionaire. Drake has the resources to fund campaigns against literally anyone he chooses. Poetic Flacco himself, on that same live space, said it, Drake could run a smear operation against Glasses Malone before Drake ever bothered running one against YG. Poetic Flacco said there are 10 people Drake would go after before YG ever came into the equation. And that admission alone is the part everybody skipped over. Because Poetic Flacco, whether he meant to or not, just confirmed the premise. If Drake would do it to 10 people, then Drake would do it, period. The only argument left is who is on the list. And that is exactly why the accusation is so believable. Because if Drake has the means, and if Drake has the motive, and if Drake has the history, then Drake being connected to a paid narrative operation is not a stretch. It is a Tuesday. It is a Wednesday. It is honestly probably a Thursday too. And this is where the Drake community always trips over its own feet. Because the same voices that scream Kendrick Lamar is irrelevant are the same voices that make 10 videos a week about Kendrick Lamar. The same voices that scream Drake is unbothered are the same voices that quote every Drake shot at Kendrick Lamar within 30 seconds of it dropping. The same voices that say the beef is over are the same voices that keep resurrecting it every 7 days. There is an anti-Kendrick delirium sweeping through a slice of the fan base right now, and it has become one of the most self-defeating movements in music history. Because the more they yell, the more they prove the very point they are trying to bury. The louder they scream, the smaller their argument gets. The harder they campaign, the clearer it becomes that the campaign itself is the tell. And in poker, in war, in courtrooms, in every arena where truth matters, the tell is always the moment the game ends. Let me put it plainly. Kendrick Lamar has become the sun that Drake's entire orbit revolves around. Kendrick Lamar has become the reference point every Drake bar bounces off of. Kendrick Lamar has become the shadow behind every Drake press cycle. Kendrick Lamar has become, and this is the part that has to hurt, the definition of Drake's career going forward. Whether Drake drops the greatest album ever made tomorrow, whether Drake sells out 10 stadiums, whether Drake ships another platinum plaque, the ceiling has already been set. Drake is the eternal runner-up of the rap ladder. The forever second. The gold plaque behind the platinum one. That is not a fantastic anything opinion, that is the raw math of the culture as of August of 2026, and the math is not showing any signs of shifting anytime soon. And speaking of math, let's talk about Not Like Us again for a second, because a lot of you Drake fans still cannot accept what these numbers actually mean. 2 billion Spotify streams for a diss track is not a normal number. It is not a fluke number. It is not a moment number. It is not a beef bump. It is not a viral spike. It is the biggest number a rap diss record has ever generated in the history of recorded music. It broke industry, baby. It broke every crossover benchmark. It broke every ceiling anyone thought existed for a song made specifically to obliterate another artist. Kendrick Lamar didn't just win the battle. Kendrick Lamar bottled the battle, sold the bottle to the entire planet, and now every stadium on Earth pours it out at victory parades. Kendrick Lamar didn't get lucky. Kendrick Lamar changed the physics of what a diss track can do. Kendrick Lamar rewrote the rulebook and then handed the rulebook back to the industry with a smile. Now, back to Glasses Malone, because his monologue got deeper the longer he talked. Glasses Malone made a point that hit like a hammer. Glasses Malone said if the conversation was truly about a real legend, if it was truly about a Scarface or a rapper of that caliber, Drake fans would be too busy listening to the discography to be online arguing. Glasses Malone said the fact that the discourse dominates everything, more than the actual music, tells you exactly what the fandom is really about. It is not about Drake's music. It is not about Drake's craft. It is not even about Drake as a human being. It is about the war. It is about the wound. It is about the humiliation of that summer that they cannot process, cannot digest, and cannot move past. And that is why every Drake stan account has become nothing but a numbers hoarding, discourse generating, algorithm farming ghost, because when the music itself cannot carry the conversation has to carry the music. And here is where I have to be honest, because I do not want to sound like I am shielding my side. Iceman, Drake's newest album, is not a bad album. Let me say that clearly, because I am not a Drake hater. Iceman is one of the more interesting Drake albums in years. Iceman is more focused than Certified Lover Boy. Iceman is sharper than Honestly Nevermind. Iceman is more curated than For All the Dogs. Iceman is a Drake album that actually sounds like Drake is trying again, like Drake has something to prove, like Drake has finally remembered that the mic is a competitive instrument and not just a diary. And in a rap landscape that has been running on fumes outside of G-Nex, that alone makes Iceman a real talking point. But, and this is the but that shatters every Drake fan's argument, Iceman is still, in the final math, a silver medal record. Because no matter how tight the production, no matter how catchy the singles, no matter how loud the numbers, Iceman lives inside a story that Kendrick Lamar wrote. Iceman is a response album. Iceman is a defense album. Iceman is a rebuttal album. And rebuttals, no matter how well written, never outrank the original argument. That is the trap. That is the ceiling. That is the gravity Drake cannot escape. Every Iceman bar that lands is a bar that lands inside the arena Kendrick Lamar built. Every Iceman single that charts is a single that only charts because Kendrick Lamar's shadow gave it a story to sell. Every Iceman interview is an interview that only exists because a Compton rapper decided, in the spring of 2024, to take the game seriously. So yes, Iceman is doing numbers. Yes, Iceman is charting. Yes, Iceman is trending. And yes, because we all know the Drake machinery has cranked up the streaming inflation and the algorithm nudges again, Iceman is dominating the top of the charts. But dominance on the charts is not the same as dominance on the culture. And the culture, as measured by the 2 billion streams Not Like Us just crossed, still belongs to Kendrick Lamar. That gap is not closing. That gap is widening every single day. The Drake camp keeps proving they cannot go a single week without saying Kendrick Lamar's name in a caption, a lyric, a podcast clip, or a paid think piece. Now, back to the streets. Because while all of this label war chess is playing out, the streets are the one place a paid narrative cannot fully control. And the streets right now are talking. The streets are saying Glasses Malone is not chasing clout. The streets are saying Glasses Malone would not put his name behind an accusation this heavy unless Glasses Malone knew, from someone he trusts, that something serious is in motion. Poetic Flacco himself, who does not agree with the full accusation, admitted it. Poetic Flacco said Glasses Malone believes what Glasses Malone is saying. And that belief, from a man of Glasses Malone's reputation in Compton, cannot be waved away, cannot be laughed off, and cannot be reduced to a clip farming stunt. But we also have to be honest about the risk. Because if Glasses Malone is wrong, and if any of these allegations cannot be substantiated, Glasses Malone is stepping into legal peril. Drake and Drake's legal team have shown, repeatedly, that they will file. They have filed against UMG. They have filed against podcasters. They have filed against journalists. They have filed against people whose only crime was retweeting a meme. So if Glasses Malone is walking this road, Glasses Malone is walking it with the understanding that his words could be tested in a courtroom. And the fact that Glasses Malone still walks it? Read the signal. Somebody who is bluffing does not stack chips that high. Somebody who is guessing does not stand this flat-footed. Somebody who is trolling does not repeat the same claim 4 times in a row, on 4 different platforms, in 4 different rooms, with the same steady tone every single time. And that is not the only risk. Because when accusations of this magnitude are made in hip-hop, the danger does not always come from the courtroom. Sometimes the danger comes from the street. Sometimes it comes from the shadows. Sometimes it comes from a face you would never suspect, doing a favor you would never see coming. And Glasses Malone knows this, because Glasses Malone said it himself. Glasses Malone said that being in a position where he can speak on things like this is not a privilege, it is a burden. Glasses Malone said many people wonder why he can say things others cannot, and the answer, Glasses Malone said, is that carrying this weight requires a life that most people would not want. That is a chilling line. That is a line only a man who has already made peace with the consequences would ever speak into a camera. That is a line that, in a different era, would have ended a lesser man's story right there. Now let's zoom back out, because there is a bigger machine at play here, and Kid Mio, on Hot 97, mapped the whole thing out. Kid Mio pointed at the ecosystem. Kid Mio pointed at DJ Academics. Kid Mio said Academics has a family tree of commentators who spin narratives on command. Kid Mio said academics has openly bragged on his own stream that he will run a false story if it helps Drake. Kid Mio said the coordinated messaging between the academics' orbit and the Drake camp is not a conspiracy theory. It is a documented pattern, provable in real time, on any given day of the week, on any given platform. And Kid Mio, unlike a lot of media faces, does not have a horse in the numbers race. Kid Mio does not benefit from lying. Kid Mio just calls what Kid Mio sees. And what Kid Mio sees is a well-funded, well-organized, well-timed public relations operation moving in exactly one direction, against Kendrick Lamar, against YG, against Glasses Malone, against anyone who dares to push back against the Toronto brand. Kid Mio also raised something the rest of the media has been too scared to touch. Kid Mio said the federal investigation into Drake's gambling ties is already active, and if Drake ever finds himself in a corner where cooperation becomes an option, the pressure to trade information for leniency becomes real. Kid Mio said imagine, hypothetically, a scenario where Drake is looking at RICO-style exposure and the only way out is to hand somebody else's name to a prosecutor. Kid Mio did not accuse. Kid Mio did not confirm. Kid Mio simply raised the question, the kind of question that lingers, the kind of question that reshapes how every future Drake headline gets read. And now let's add the newest twist. Because A$AP Rocky, yes, A$AP Rocky, fresh off a Grammy-worthy cycle of his own, fresh off a fashion year that put him back at the center of culture, was asked in a recent boxing interview who he would fight, and A$AP Rocky's answer was Drake. Knuckle up, Irish style, no gloves, old-timey, put him out. A$AP Rocky said Drake. And whether A$AP Rocky was joking, half-joking, or completely serious, that answer landed like a slap heard across every Drake blog on the internet. Because A$AP Rocky is not a small name. A$AP Rocky is a fashion icon, a Grammy nominee, a father, a partner to one of the biggest women in music, and a rapper with a fan base that spans continents. When A$AP Rocky picks Drake as his fantasy boxing opponent, that is not a punchline. That is a cultural signal, and the signal is that Drake, in 2026, has more enemies in the game than he has real friends. Let me ask you directly. Who do you take in that fight? Drake versus A$AP Rocky, no gloves, no rules, no rounds, no referees. Drop your answer in the comments. Because I have my pick, and I am pretty sure most of you have yours too, and I want to see the coast-by-coast breakdown in the replies. Now, back to the smoke, because the reason all of this matters is not the beef itself. The reason it matters is the ripple. Because when a rapper is accused of funding narratives that could put another rapper in prison, that is not a diss track anymore. That is not a bar-for-bar exchange. That is an accusation of using wealth as a weapon against another black man's freedom. And whether or not the accusation is proven, the accusation itself changes how the culture reads Drake going forward. Because every Drake fan who dismisses this without a second thought is telling us they are okay with the possibility. And every Kendrick Lamar fan who believes it without evidence is telling us they were already primed to believe the worst. That is the state of the fandom right now, irreparably split, waiting for the receipts and running on nothing but tension, adrenaline, and the memory of that summer that never really ended. And the tension is only going to grow. Because Kendrick Lamar's next move, which, according to multiple industry whispers, is already in motion, will not be another diss album, no matter how badly DJ Academics and his orbit want to sell you that fanfiction. Let me be clear on this. Kendrick Lamar does not need a diss album. Kendrick Lamar has an album's worth of unreleased material rumored to sit within the same lyrical universe as Not Like Us, Euphoria, Meet the Grahams, and 616 in LA. Kendrick Lamar has already won the battle. What Kendrick Lamar is about to do, and every source, every whisper, every leak points in the same direction, is close the war entirely. And when Kendrick Lamar closes it, the closing will not sound like a shot. It will sound like a coronation. Meanwhile, on the other side, Drake is back in the studio. Again. And you already know the joke writes itself, because Drake has been in the studio nonstop for the better part of a decade. Drake being in the studio is not news. Drake being in the studio is a status update. Drake being in the studio is a weather forecast. And the reports say Drake is working on more material, Another album, another wave of songs, another swing at the fastball Kendrick Lamar has been throwing since March of 2024. Which is fine. Drake is allowed to keep swinging. But every swing that misses only reinforces the ceiling that Iceman itself already confirmed. The eternal runner-up cannot outrun the record book. The record book already wrote him in ink, in bold, with a footnote that reads second place. And there is something else the Drake camp really should be considering. The reports are saying Drake's next project is being recorded in a room designed to look like a cartel-adjacent cinematic set, fireplaces, low light, moody photographs, curated wardrobe. And every image leaking from those sessions is being interpreted, fairly or unfairly, as more RICO-adjacent optics. Which, for a rapper already tangled in gambling investigations and now shadow-linked to paid narrative allegations, is not the moment to be leaning into imagery that federal prosecutors love to screenshot and drop into an indictment slide deck. Read the room. The optics matter. The visual language of a rollout is part of the evidentiary universe now. And Drake, whether he realizes it or not, is telegraphing an aesthetic that plays perfectly into the exact narrative Glasses Malone is trying to unmask. Now let's talk about the danger side of all this, because we cannot just gloss over it. Glasses Malone speaking on Drake, on YG, on Drakeo the Ruler, on paid campaigns. Glasses Malone is not doing this from a bunker. Glasses Malone is doing this from a public podcast on public airwaves, with his real face and his real name attached and his real address probably being pulled up by real people right now. That kind of courage in hip-hop is rare. That kind of transparency in hip-hop is even rarer. And that kind of exposure to consequences is the reason most media figures in this space stay in the safe lane and never speak on the real ones. So whether Glasses Malone is 100% right, 90% right, or 50% right, the fact that Glasses Malone is willing to put his weight on it changes the balance. Because when the streets speak, the industry listens. And the streets right now are listening to Glasses Malone with both ears open. And now, on the flip side, we have to talk about the Kendrick Lamar shots too. Because in the last week, a small but growing group of Drake loyalists have started trying to pull Kendrick Lamar into the Drakeo the Ruler conversation. That is dangerous territory. That is the kind of narrative that goes from Twitter to real life the second one unhinged person decides to act on it. And that is why Glasses Malone speaking now, publicly, is not just an accusation. It is a warning shot. It is a public flare fired into the night sky saying we see the machine, we see the messaging, we see the direction, and we are not letting it go unnoticed. Because if the machine keeps running unchecked, the machine eventually produces a tragedy. And nobody, not the Kendrick Lamar side, not the Drake side, not the neutrals, needs another tragedy in a genre that already carries too many. Think about how sick that pivot really is. Drake fans who spent years pretending Drakeo the Ruler did not exist are suddenly quoting Drakeo's music, invoking Drakeo's memory, and weaponizing Drakeo's name in a war Drakeo never got to speak on. Drake fans who called GNX trash are now trying to argue Kendrick Lamar stole from Drakeo. Drake fans who mocked the entire West Coast are now cosplaying as Drakeo scholars. That is not fandom. That is not respect. That is the coldest kind of opportunism a music community can practice, mining a dead artist's legacy for ammunition in a beef the dead artist never signed up for. And every Kendrick Lamar fan, every YG fan, every real hip-hop fan needs to name that behavior for exactly what it is. Because if we let that kind of exploitation slide unchallenged, we teach the machine that dead artists are free ammo. Now, the numbers again, because I want to leave you with what actually matters. 2 billion streams. The fastest rap song ever to hit that milestone. A cultural anthem played at every stadium, every arena, every playoff round, every championship parade on earth. That is Kendrick Lamar's ledger right now. Whatever noise the other side generates, that ledger does not move. Whatever campaigns get funded, that ledger does not move. Whatever narratives get planted, that ledger does not move. Because the culture has already voted, and the votes were counted in streams, in stadiums, in tunnels, in trophies, in tears from a fan base that has spent 2 years trying to argue away a scoreboard that will not blink. and that is the piece Drake fans still cannot accept. The scoreboard does not blink. The scoreboard does not negotiate. The scoreboard does not care about your Grammy campaigns, your radio spins, your algorithm boosts, your paid think pieces, or your late-night podcast defenses. The scoreboard just tells the truth, over and over again, every single day. And every single day, the scoreboard says the same 3 words. Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar. There is also something worth saying about the way Kendrick Lamar himself is carrying this whole storm. Kendrick Lamar has not tweeted. Kendrick Lamar has not posted a long note. Kendrick Lamar has not gone on a podcast. Kendrick Lamar has not sat with a magazine, sat with a reporter, or sat with a Stan account offering a defense. Kendrick Lamar has just kept moving, touring, recording, breathing, living, being a father, being an artist, being the version of himself that the culture rewards over and over again. And every day that Kendrick Lamar refuses to feed the algorithm the way Drake feeds it, the culture rewards Kendrick Lamar with more oxygen than any press release could ever generate. That is the difference between the two men, distilled to its purest form. One is chasing the moment. The other one is the moment. So let me put it all together for you. Glasses Malone is doubling down on his accusations against Drake. Kid Mio is echoing the same sentiment on Hot 97. YG is on red alert on Instagram. A$AP Rocky is picking Drake as his fantasy boxing opponent on national platforms. Not Like Us just crossed 2 billion streams as the fastest rap song in history. Kendrick Lamar's next project is loading in the background. Poetic Flacco is quietly confirming the premise he claims to disagree with. DJ Academics is spiraling on airwaves he no longer controls the narrative of. And Drake, in the middle of all of it, is back in the studio trying to write his way out of a room Kendrick Lamar already locked from the outside. That is the story. That is the map. That is the culture as it stands in August of 2026. And the only question left is which direction the next chapter breaks. Does Glasses Malone bring receipts? Does Kid Mio drop names? Does YG survive the machine? Does A$AP Rocky actually catch Drake in a ring? Does Kendrick Lamar drop an album that ends the conversation entirely? Does DJ Academics finally get held accountable for the family tree of misinformation that surrounds him? Does Drake's own team finally realize that